Imagine, a podcast series by Imagine Theatre.
Hello again, my name is Martin Ballard. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 5. Wow, that is the 11th episode overall of this series from one of the UK's biggest producer of pantomime and children's theatre.
For more information, go to their website at www.imaginetheatre.co.uk.
As we continue the countdown to Panto 2021, we've taken you behind the scenes at Imagine Theatre in all of the previous episodes, meeting directors, choreographers, lighting designers, and some of the stars of Imagine Theatre shows. Now don't worry if you missed any of the previous episodes because they are all still available. Now in episode 10 I spoke to the Senior Curator of Modern and Contemporary Performance at the Victoria and Albert Museum, fount of all Panto knowledge, Simon Sladen, the man behind Panto Day. This time, I'm delighted to have been joined by the actor, musician, director, singer and musical director, Stephen Wren. How are you, Stephen?
Hello, Martin. Yes, I'm all good. Thank you very much. Lovely to be here with you.
Now, of course, you've worked extensively in theatre and television, but let's start at the beginning. Where did your theatre journey begin, Stephen?
Oh, heavens, right. How far back do you want me to go? Probably, let's go back to when I was 18. And I had been in a college in Canada for 2 years doing an international baccalaureate, which I failed by 2 points. I just missed it. And when I'd done that, I go, right, what can I do? I was going to be doing biology at university, had I passed the thing. And I'm going, well, I'm not going to do that now. So what else? I thought, right, singing. I've always fancied singing. I've never studied music. I never did it at O level, never did any of that. Let's give that a go. A week or so later, I got a report card from the college and we had kind of a personal tutor sort of person on there. And he said, Stephen's academic results don't in any way reflect the time he's had with us, but his music will point the way. And I thought, well, there you are. There's a kind of joining of omens to make that happen. So I applied for a music college. They said, no, you've not got enough experience. Go and do your A-level first. So I did, went back to them the next day. And while I was doing that, I realised that the singing that we were doing was all operatic, and it was long before they ever did a still or any of that sort of stuff. So I knew that my kind of voice wasn't going to be an operatic voice. So I thought, I wonder if I added acting to this, it would help. So I applied to Bretton Hall in Yorkshire to do a music and drama degree. But the music that they were doing was stuff that I had already done. So I thought, what's the point of that? I'll just not bother. And then they offered me a place on the honours degree in drama that they were just starting and said, would you do that instead in acting? I went, yeah, okay, I'll give that a go. So that's where it started. So that's how the combination of both music and acting happened. So I've trained in both. And it's a really handy thing. It's given me a fair old amount of work over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, they both come together very much so in Panto, don't they? Now, what about early performances? Were you a performer? Were you involved in school shows? And what sort of theatre did you see as a child?
Well, the first thing I went to see, like most kids, was a panto. Now, this will take some of your listeners back. It was Stanley Baxter and Ronnie Corbett at the King's Theatre in Edinburgh in 1967. So I was about 7 when I saw that. I'm not sure what it was about it that made me remember it all these years later. There were things like, with the difference in the heights of these two, Stanley always wore tall costumes and Ronnie had little costumes. So Stanley was a golf bag, Ronnie was a kind of weekend away bag. Stanley was a Knickerbocker Glory, Ronnie was like these silver bowls with the one scoop. So it was all that sort of thing. And over the years I began to wonder if I had just imagined it. And then about 4 years ago, somebody posted a picture on Facebook of the two golf bag costumes. I went, no, it was true. I did see that. So that was the thing that got me going. We were never a theatrical family. It was an ordinary working class family. We didn't go to the theatre regularly at all. In fact, that's the only time I remember as a kid going to the theatre.
Did that sort of spark something in you to become a performer, though?
I don't know. I honestly think that was there. My mum told a story of when she was in hospital getting her appendix out when I was maybe 2. And I went in to visit her, apparently. I have no recollection of this whatsoever, but it's a story she used to tell. And I got up on the chair and I sang, I wanna be Bobby's girl. So that was what I was singing. Do you think I might have been gay by then? I'm not sure. And my mum started laughing, just out of, I'm like, oh, my laddie, I'm just kind of laughing gently. But I took that as she was laughing at me, and I stomped down off the chair, and that's apparently I said, well, if you're going to laugh, I'm not going to sing. My, how times have changed. I want them to laugh when I'm singing now.
And that's where the Susan Morn fan club began.
It pretty much was.
So once you finished your training then, presumably it was into theatre, was it? Because I know you've done television and other things, but you've pretty much toured with just about every Scottish theatre company, haven't you?
Well, back in the day, yeah, not so much now, but sure, back in the day, the first job was with Wildcat. Now, they were an offshoot of 784. And 784, as your listeners will know, was a political theatre company. But some of the members of that company wanted to do more musical work, so they branched off and they named themselves Wildcat after Wildcat Strikes. So the first thing I did was a show about the miners' strike during the miners' strike called Dead Liberty, and I was playing a cop. So you can imagine, it was about 5 kids who grew up in a mining village, and they all became different aspects of the strike. So you can imagine, here I am in my first job as a 24-year-old actor, and I come out in sterling miners' welfare as a cop. And I just got yelled at and shouted at and heckled, and it was horrendous. But the joyful thing was that the speech that I had to give was a personalised speech that was taken from stories that my brother had told me, who was a cop at the time, about the fear of being on the picket line and all that sort of stuff. So from being yelled at when I arrived, I told them my story and I got a cheer. And it suddenly, their opinion of the cops doing their job changed. And I think that's one of the amazing things that sort of political theatre can do. Really get to people and make them listen to a different point of view and help them to think differently.
That's a great example of the power of theatre, isn't it? And the other thing that you mentioned early on was that, we've heard this story so many times on this podcast series from people who went to see Panto. They were from families who would never ordinarily go to a theatre, and it inspired them. Again, the power of theatre, isn't it?
There's something about the experience that I had, and I remember clearly those costumes, and I also remember the ball, and it was all in red and black and in huge crinolines for the women, and they flew in mirrored pillars with candelabra things stuck to them, and I was in awe. We were up in we were in the front row of the upper circle. The King's Theatre in those days held about 2,500 people. It was huge. And we were in the front row of the upper circle, and I remember when Buttons was throwing out the sweeties. Now, in those days, it was boxes of Smarties and Rowntree's pastels that they were chucking out. And he was throwing it in the stalls and here and there and doing the stuff. And my dad had a brilliant whistle. You know that whistle where people fold their tongue back and just whistle? So he could do that, I can't. So he did that and went, up here! And the fellow went, oh, I don't think I can manage that. Come on! My dad shouted. So drum roll. So he threw a drum roll and he did this kind of backhand, underhand throw. And it went whoosh. And it landed on the vents of the lights just in front of the circle. So I was held over by the waist to reach forward and get this box of sweeties.
There are any number of elements of that story that health and safety would never allow today.
I know. I had to beg Steve Bowden at Imagine to allow me to do a sweetie throughout a couple of years ago. It was like, how can we do it? But it turned out I researched what was available, and we found little mini packets of Haribos. So that as soon as I hit them out with my tennis racket, the air caught them and they slowed down and they just wafted onto people rather than give them black eyes. It was hilarious.
Now we can talk about television and film as well, of course, because you've done a number of things over the years. People may remember seeing you in Taggart or Judas Goat, for instance, or A Shot at Glory.
It was a football thing. And they got, here I go with names, I can't remember. There was a brilliant Rangers player. His name might come to me. If I'd known we were going to talk about this, I would have tried to find out what his name was. And we met in the in the makeup chairs, and as I said to him, "Oh, yeah, for our scene, do you want to go through the lines?" And he said, I said, "So how did you get involved in doing the thing?" He said, "Oh, well, it's just because whenever they do films or telly about football and that, the football's always rubbish because they don't get footballers to do it." I said, "Does that mean that the acting's going to be rubbish now that you're doing the acting?" And he did laugh, but it was a while ago. I wish I could remember his name.
Was it
Rubbish
Ali
story.
McCoist?
It's the very fellow, yes.
Yeah.
Ali McCoist, he was the one. He was a laugh. He was nice to work with.
So television came along then, what, in the 90s or early? Well, Taggart was earlier than that, wasn't it?
Oh, well, I've done Taggart 3 times. I've been a cop twice and a baddie once. I was the major red herring in the last one I did. No, the very first television job I had was a Taggart, and there was a severed leg found in a lay-by beside a motorway. So I was a cop who, Taggart himself was the original Taggart, obviously, back then. It was actually only, I think it was the 3rd episodes they'd ever done. So anyway, he arrives in the car, he gets out the car, he looks at me, I look at him, he looks at me, I look at him, I'm going, "I'm really sorry." And continuity shouted over, "Mark, it's your line, who found it?" He just tapped me on the arm and went, "Sorry, son." Got back in the car and went. I thought it was me that had made a complete mess of my first ever line on Taggart. But my line was, when he said, "Who found it?" my first line on telly was, "The van driver, stop for a pee."
It's amazing how you remember those lines, isn't it?
Oh, it was a belter.
Now, since then, you've done an awful lot of other things, including voiceover work. I'm sure people listening to your voice on this podcast will think, I know that voice from somewhere. You've done corporate training and other things. But eventually, many years after seeing Stanley Baxter and Ronnie Corbett, you appeared in your first panto. How did that come about?
It was after that first job with Wildcat, and there was a really strong theatre scene in Glasgow at the time. And, everybody came to see everything. The people who ran Borderline Theatre Company saw me do that. And with Wildcat, what you did, and it was way before its time in terms of the actors were the musicians. So you were the onstage band, and I know that's really popular now, but we were doing that way back in the 80s. And so the people who ran Borderline Theatre Company were doing the pantomime in the Magnum Centre in Irvine. And they said, "Oh, we're looking for a musical director. Do you want to do it?" I went, "Aye, absolutely." So for 5 years I was musical director of those pantos, and it was the 80s. It was really simple. It was all live acoustic instruments. It was basically me, a guitar and a drummer. So I was on piano and stuff. So I did 5 of those, and then there was a wee gap, and then I started to play parts. So I did A Mother Goose at Perth, where I played the baddie. And then I did An Ugly Sister for the first time, and then I did Ugly Sister again for Imagine in Kilmarnock.
Well, it's interesting. I said to you before we started this podcast that I'd look at your website, and it's really interesting to have a look at other people, and the same can be said for Ian Lachlan and others that I've spoken to, because we've all worn the same costumes.
We have, despite whatever different sizes we all are. I know somehow they managed to shoehorn us all into the same frocks. Oh, it's hilarious. But yes, that's one of the things with a major production company that's repeating productions and jollying them up as they go round, is that, yeah, you do see dames, particularly at the photo shoot, because that's the only chance we get to interact with each other as dames from other productions. As you're finishing your photo shoot, the next ones are ready and they're all in costume. "Oh, I wore that 2 years ago in X, Y, or Z."
Yeah. Oh, the interesting thing as well is you look at a picture, maybe on the Imagine website or whatever, and you see the costume, you think, "Is that me? Or is that Stephen Wren? Who's that?"
Do you know what, Martin? It's never me. Steve Bowden, take notes.
So what was it like the very first time you played the Dame? Do you remember that first experience?
I do. I think, do you know what the thing is about a Dame Martin for me is that it's a disguise, and it's such a strong costume that it allows you to say and do things that you wouldn't have thought of if you didn't have it on. Particularly when you're in performance and something happens and you cover it. You go, would I have thought of that if I wasn't in this? Mm-hmm. So it is that kind of, well, the character takes over. I don't want to sound too ridiculous as an actor, but do you know what I mean? It is that sort of thing that it opens up a world to you that you didn't have until you wore the costume. I had a thing once, I did a modern version of The Beggar's Opera. It was again with Wildcat. It was a joint production between Wildcat and the Lyceum in Edinburgh. And I was playing Lockett, the jailer, and I'm reading the script and I'm not getting any clues as to how I'm going to play it. I have no idea. So you turn up on day one and it's the read-through and everything. And before we did the read-through, I saw the costume design. They designed for me a kind of period tuxedo, which was absolutely beautiful, but with an eye patch. And I went, I've got it. And just seeing the design of the eye patch, I realised how I could play the character. So if you extend that to something like a dame's costume, then the liberation that offers is just, well, liberating, I suppose. It's just extraordinary. I love it.
You're absolutely right. And you know, the physicality of the character, particularly a dame, is defined by the costumes, isn't it?
Now, Martin, are you a dame in heels or are you a dame in boots?
I'm a dame in boots.
I'm a dame in heels. I don't feel right in boots. I mean, I have played the dame in boots for Imagine before, but when I was not playing the Ugly Sister, because the costumes have to match for that, so you go with that. But when I played my first solo dame for them, I was straight to the wardrobe department and said, darling, what have you got in the way of heels? Let's have some heels. And they found me the most magnificent pair of pink platform heels that are 6 inches high. Now, obviously, I don't wear them all the time. And I said to them, look, I've never worn heels quite this high. Can I take them home to practice with? And they said, yes, but you have to take a picture of them on the plane. So I was coming back to Edinburgh from Birmingham. So I went, right, I'll do it. So I'm sitting on the plane and we're happily cruising. They'd been through with the cups of tea and stuff. And I can't remember what I asked the woman next to me. Oh yes, I said, would you take a picture of me for a moment? She went, yeah. I went, no, just a minute. I just have to put something on. So I went into my hand luggage, got out these pink shoes, put them on, and I was right up to the ceiling of the plane because I'm 6 foot tall. So I was right up to the ceiling of the plane. I said, would you mind just taking a picture of this? So she leaned out into the aisle of the plane and took my picture. And of course, everybody's looking and wondering what I was doing. I went, darling, panto dame, don't worry about it. Everything's fine. Relax.
And everybody on the plane was going, what, in June?
Exactly. Yeah. So I love my heels. And in those heels, I did a Proud Mary. I was Tina Turner in Proud Mary in these great big pink heels, and all the front of house women were going, how do you do that? It's practice, darling, practice. To me, the dame is your favourite auntie. That's who I play. I play your favourite auntie. I had an old Auntie Frances. It was my mum's auntie. And she was just funny without knowing she was funny. And she was warm and she was gregarious. She was a laugh. So I don't put on a voice. This is the voice I use, except I probably make the accent stronger because there is so much humour to be had out of a Scottish accent and Scottish words that we have for things, that it's just the greatest fun. I mean, for instance, when I did Snow White a couple of years ago, I changed all the names to Scottish names. So you had things like Gallus and Shugal and Dreich. That's what the characters were called that. So Dreich is that, for you people who don't know, it's a wet, miserable day where it's not quite raining, but it's not quite dry either. And it's just miserable. So that was a really miserable Gallus is like, yeah, come on then, come at me. Is a kind of right up front kind of character. So it gave them the idea of how to play their characters. So there was one called Shugal, and Shugal means shake. And so he was very nervous. So I've got my old Auntie Frances in my mind when I'm playing my dame.
Yeah, my dame is an amalgamation influenced by the likes of Norman Evans and Les Dawson, but also influenced by members of the family like your auntie and, you know, people that you might know in the village. It's really important that the character is warm and that people in the audience can relate to it. But of course, there are many different types of dame, aren't there?
Some head towards drag and some head towards grotesque. And it sounds like you and I are somewhere in the middle of that.
But interesting, isn't it, to look at the different ways that even though we wear the same costumes, we can play the character in different ways. I think that's interesting in itself, isn't it?
Do you know, I often wonder what it must be like, and I've spoken about it briefly, for the Imagine permanent staff who see all the pantos every year. So they're seeing a production, 4, 5, 6 years on the trot, but with different people playing it, with different modifications to the scripts, with different songs and all that, and different styles of playing the dame. And yet, it all works.
And I think the beauty of Panto is that it's never the same, even in the same venue with the same cast. The show
Sure.
can be so very different day to day, can't it?
Yeah, well, I know that one of Ian Laughlin's thing that he often says is that there's always the final member of the cast only turns up on opening night, because the audience plays such a big part in what happens in each show, and that's why they're never the same twice. But we just love that it's never the same twice, and you just take it in your stride with whatever happens, whatever goes right, whatever goes wrong, whatever silly thing happens, some heckle that you've never had before, or sometimes you get people up on stage sometimes and you never know what they're going to do, you never know what they're going to say, but you just have to be poised and ready to run with anything. It's great.
And in many ways, the Dame can be a loose cannon, can go with the comedy and the flow, but you also direct, don't you? So
I do.
Is that a conflict of interest in that respect?
I'm just very strict with myself when I'm doing all my ad libs. But it's true. No, I always say to the company, particularly the comic, and because I've been Dame as well, so the comic and I, we can go off on a tangent, but we must come right back, because once or twice, in the hundreds of shows that you do, it can go on for a few seconds too long, and I'll just go, we went a bit too far last night, let's just rein that in, let's not even go to that little bit of kind of new business that happened, let's not go to that tomorrow night, let's go back to the original, and if something else happens, we run with that, but let's not try and make that same thing happen again. Although sometimes something is so precious, some major thing that just happened was hilarious, you go, right, we're keeping that, and it stays in. I try to be quite strict. I like it to be right. I like it to develop and grow as you see what audiences respond to, but I like it to be within parameters.
I think that surprises a lot of audiences. If you said to an audience member, Panto is a really disciplined form of theatre, they laugh in your face, but actually it has to be disciplined. Somebody said to me many years ago, in the traditional proscenium march theatre, if you look at the proscenium march as a picture frame, the story driven character should stay within the frame of that picture. Then the other comedy characters, the Dame, the comic, and to a certain extent the baddie and so on, can step forward on the apron and engage directly with the audience, and that's where the spontaneity comes, isn't it?
For sure. I mean, that is what Panto does that's different to other forms of comedy. I mean, One Master, Two Governors completely borrowed that idea with the James Corden main comedy character talking straight to us in the audience. And it had, just as we do, it had its plants and its setups. There were the two planted things. There was a woman came up from the audience. She was a plant. There was a thing about a sandwich. I'm not going to give away anything because I'm sure everybody's seen it that listens to your podcasts. And there was a thing about somebody needed a sandwich. What's on your sandwich? Hummus. And of course everybody laughs. It's the same person with the same hummus sandwich every night. Do you think we would leave that to trust? Are you kidding me? So we have to control it. It has to be herded, but within a fairly big field. That's a stupid analogy, but there you are. That's what you got from me.
We've spoken about everything that you've done in your career, but of course one thing got in the way of every one of those jobs, and that was COVID-19. How have you coped?
Well, it's been very up and down. I don't want to be too sad about everything. I don't want to go too far, but my mum died of COVID last year, and she was in a care home, and for 10 weeks beforehand, all I could do with her was sing to her and play the piano on WhatsApp, because the staff very kindly took in a device every day, and we sang through the 101 hits for buskers of Frank Sinatra songs. So that was a challenge in terms of work. Well, like everybody else who's in the industry, the diaries were decimated, so that was that. But the one joy that I had towards Panto time was James Mackenzie Blackman, who runs the theatre in Inverness, wanted to do something, and he wanted to do a kind of ode to Panto, and so he phoned me and tasked me with writing something. He said something along the lines of, or with the kind of rhythm of, it was the night before Christmas and all through the house. And he said it was like the night before Panto. So I took that as my thing, and I wrote this in about an hour and a half. It just began to flow out of me. And I wrote this kind of 15-verse thing. And then he handed it to a filmmaker who then said, well, we've got 2 days, so we can't do 15 verses. Can you make it 9? And so I edited and cut and, kept the story, and we discussed what we should keep and what he thought he could film and all that. And in 2 days, he put together the most beautiful little, I'm going to cry, the most beautiful little film about just a nod to Panto. And it wasn't overly sentimental, but it was just saying, we miss it and we wish it. So the spirit of Panto, I decided, was the ghost light that would be left on the theatre. And that would be the thing. And what he did was he zoomed into that and then went all out of focus. And when he zoomed out, there was a wee kid putting a decoration on the big Christmas tree outside the theatre. And my punchline was that whatever we think, that Panto is still alive in the mind of a child.
It was beautiful. I saw it. I talked to James about it actually on the previous podcast, because I think it spoke for everybody involved in theatre and everybody who loves theatre, not just Panto.
Yeah.
I think it was something that everybody could relate to. It was absolutely stunning.
It's funny that I haven't written much. I mean, I've written one Panto for Imagine, and I've written sketches and stuff. But sometimes, people always say when you're writing, write from what you know. And, well, by God, I did know that. And I knew that feeling, and I knew what I wanted. Because 4 times the Panto in Inverness has broken box office records. 4 times in my 8-year stint with them, we've broken the record. And the last one we did was the biggest audience that I'd ever seen anything in Inverness. And I follow their Facebook page. And when we said we couldn't do it, just the what we're going to do, every year we do this, there were hundreds of people responded saying we're really going to miss it, it's an annual thing. And people come from the Western Isles, they take a day to get to the theatre, they stay overnight, they see the show, they stay another night, and then they take a day to get back, and it's cars and ferries and stuff. So we have a huge responsibility to make that journey worthwhile. There's a huge expectation that we can get to do some version of Cinderella this year.
Yeah, we're all excited about that. Now we have 3 final questions to finish with. I've asked all of the previous guests the same question. In fact, we're collating the most popular Panto as chosen by our podcast guests. So the first question for you, Stephen, is what's your favourite title?
Mother Goose. I think, well, it's not the best known story, but it's a story of ego and redemption, because she wants to be young and beautiful, she wants to be rich, and she gets those things through the magic of the golden eggs. But she betrays herself, and she betrays the truth of it by giving away the goose to the baddie, and it's all just for her vanity and ego. So her mission in Act 2 is to make amends, and she does. And I think it's a brilliant morality tale from that point of view. And there are so many lessons to be learned from it. And it's, from a dame's point of view, well, for once you're the centre of the story. And I just love Mother Goose as a story. I think it's great.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, the moral in Panto stories is really important. Interestingly, a lot of people have chosen things that they enjoy doing that they know, for instance, and Mother Goose is a good example of that, would not sell as well as, say, Aladdin or even Beauty and the Beast and things that have been turned into Disney movies recently. Yeah,
well, that's for the producers to worry about. You asked me what I like, that's what I like. And also it was the first one I directed for Imagine. And it came as a complete bolt out of the blue that they asked me. I had just finished my season in Kilmarnock on Hogmanay, and on the 2nd of January, Steve phoned me and said, do you think you could direct and play Dame? And I was terrified. The next day I was in Coventry watching the production that I was going to be getting, and I asked if I could just direct, just to see if I could do it, because I had no idea. So it has a special place for me from that point of view, because it was the first one I directed too.
I've done it a couple of times. Did you have the magic fountain by any chance?
No, it was a different set. It was a thing that where the one. Oh yes, no, there was a magic fountain, and it was on a roller thing.
Yeah, and you had a very quick change to get into that, as I recall.
Yeah, well, I didn't play the Dame that year. I was too frightened to do both at once. But But yes, there was a very quick change for all that.
Quick changes are obviously something that dames have to get used to. There are lots of other things that could possibly go wrong in a panto. When was it not all right on the night, Stephen?
That's a hard one. What was it? My third panto with Borderline at the Magnum Centre, which is a big sports centre that's got a theatre in it. Somebody forgot to isolate the fire alarm in the theatre, so when there was a cannon being shot, it was the human cannonball, it was a circus-based thing, and the pyro from the cannon set the alarm off, and I got the thing through. I was in the pit, and I got the message through the cans going, cut to the finale, and the guy playing the Dane came out and go, now then, Uncle Steve, let's just sing that song that we're going to sing at the end of the show. So we went, oh, okay then. So we just sang this, all right, goodbye, no plot denouement, the kids had no idea what was going on. We stood at the door and waved as everybody left. Nobody had a clue what was going on. Mad.
With all that in mind, and with everything we've spoken about, and taking you right the way back to those early days with Stanley Baxter and Ronnie Corbett, why is panto so special for you?
Oh, I don't know. Well, from a completely personal point of view, it's the biggest earner of my year. It's the one project that does the most for me in terms of work. But the other thing is, how to say this without being ridiculous? I think it's the joy it spreads. It does nothing but spread complete and utter joy. It's that whole cabaret thing, leave your troubles outside. I think the happiest review I had was from Joyce McMillan in The Scotsman, and at the end of a review she said, this is the stuff that memories are made of. And I go, that's what I'm trying to do. And I think that is why panto is so important, because it creates memories that last a lifetime.
That is absolutely incredible. What a great review. Absolutely fabulous. And now we are slowly but surely, fingers crossed, coming out of COVID-19 lockdown, and we're getting excited about panto. What does the future hold for you? Because you've done all sorts of other things I haven't even mentioned, into the music, the BBC television series, for instance. Have you got now work lining up?
No, there's not much. I'm speaking to a couple of producers about some filming work. It's not kind of big telly or anything, but and it's all just about fitting it in, and can we do it COVID safely and all that sort of stuff. But I've got the Cinderella script open on my kitchen table now, and where are we? Middle of July. And I'm just going, right, how are we going to make this happen? It's just that hope that the restrictions will be such that there'll be enough people in the house to be able to do the full tilt Cinderella.
Whatever form it takes, Stephen, we can't have another year without panto, can we? The show must go on.
Surely to God we can do something this year, even if it's a four-hander that's based on panto. Surely we'll get something out of this year. But I would love to do it full tilt with the full ensemble. I'm lucky up there. I get an ensemble of 6. I get sets of 8 kids doing the things. But if we couldn't do it with an ensemble and I couldn't do it with the kids, what's the ball going to be like? There's nothing. So we're going to be doing it with mannequins. It'll be like the opening of Act 2 of Phantom of the Opera. It'll all be mannequins. But still, I'll get some comedy out of that. I'll be dancing with them all and go, you didn't say much, do you?
Well, listen, it's been a joy talking to you. Thank you so much for your time, Stephen.
It's been my pleasure too.
We'll see you back on stage this Christmas in Cinderella. Thank you so much for talking to us.
I would love that. Great to talk to you, Martin. Thank you.
Well, that's it from this episode. Don't forget you can subscribe through your favourite podcast app. Make sure you do that now. I'm Martin Ballard, and I'll see you next time when I'll be talking to the Scottish television and theatre actress, star of a number of sitcoms and children's television programmes, Jane McCarry. So take care and join me next time for episode 12 of Just Imagine.
Thank you for listening to the latest edition of Just Imagine, the podcast series from Imagine Theatre. And you can find out more by going to www.imaginetheatre.co.uk.